Welcome to the Teach Better Talk podcast, your official podcast for the Teach Better Podcast Network, the hub for all things education, brought to you by teachbetter.com. The Teach Better Talk podcast is committed to answering your burning questions through a variety of lenses and bringing new offers to you and your colleagues to help you thrive throughout the school year. My name is Ray Hewart, and we love your questions here on the pod. If you have any questions that you'd love us to consider as topics for future episodes, please share them with us by emailing info@teachbetter.com. What role do school leaders play with teachers that are struggling with student behaviors? This question is going to lead our conversation today. But before we get too far into it, I want to give a quick team shout out to Jeffrey Gargis. You guys know that Jeff is my main man. I love the work that he does, Mr. Co-founder and COO. He works in the background so frequently with all the key questions and logistics of our team, but he also is an incredible facilitator of our Edu Creator Club Plus program and so many other things. So for those of you that work with Jeff, you know how amazing he is. And if you don't interact with Jeff, I would really encourage you to make sure you go follow him on social media and choose to engage with the content he puts out. I'm such a mega fan and really appreciate the work you do, Jeff. We appreciate you. Another person we appreciate, somebody I also follow on social media, and it is a dream to be able to interview him, is our incredible guest. We have Danny here with us. Danny, how are you feeling? Thanks for joining the show.
I'm doing well. I appreciate you having me, Ray. It's an honor to be with you guys, and I certainly appreciate the platform you give educators, the way you amplify the great work of teachers and the important work in education. So it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
No, I'm thrilled that we were able to make this happen. An inside joke that I have to bring up on the podcast is that we rescheduled this podcast recording. Maybe I'm being dramatic, but like 37 times. And I was adamant this had to happen. So I really appreciate that we were able to make this come together. This is a dream come true. And I'm so thrilled that you're able to bring your insight to our Teach Better family and everything in between. So thank you for fitting us into your very busy schedule.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, needless to say, friends, just so you know, it's my fault that we had to reschedule, not Danny's. He was totally up for any time, and I was the terrible person having to reschedule. Anywho, Danny, do us a favor. I am confident that 99% of our community know who you are, especially if they're watching over on YouTube because they're able to see you. But for those of you listening who haven't quite identified the voice of our guest yet, Danny, do you mind sharing a little bit about who you are, what you do, what you've done, and all that great stuff?
Sure. Well, I just retired this summer, 31 years in public education. Began my career as a teacher and coach, did that for 8 years in both urban settings and very affluent settings. And then I was a high school assistant principal for 10 years and a principal for 12 years. So, and there was 1 year where I taught at a local university, instructional leadership. So I feel like I've been in working with teachers and other school leaders for 3 decades. And I always loved the work, but it was time to do something just a bit different. And about my career sort of took on a slightly different trajectory about 7 or 8 years ago when I was sort of introduced to Twitter in terms of a way of building a professional network. And just became so inspired by educators, principals across the country. Like I thought I was good at what I did. I had actually gotten kind of cocky. And I see what principals in Wisconsin are doing, in Minnesota, in Washington, Oregon. And I'm like, wow, so it really raised the ceiling for me. I started a blog, started doing some writing, and I found that the stuff I was putting out on Twitter it resonated with folks, and led to writing a couple of books with Todd Whitaker. And then I did some other writing on my own and got to speak. And so that's a whole sort of separate part of my career that I never really imagined, but was made possible when I started building a professional learning network, mainly on Twitter.
Yeah, no, shout out to Todd Whitaker, an amazing member of our Teach Better family. For those of you who may not be connected to him, I promise you've read his work. Go follow him and you'll quickly realize the amazing work that he's doing, that you are for sure influenced by. And Danny, your tweets are, I feel like, legendary. I can't imagine that somebody listening, whether you have a Twitter account or not, you have probably been exposed to Danny's tweet because your content is shared everywhere. People screenshot your tweets and share them on Facebook, or screenshot your tweets and send them in an email form. I just feel like I have come across your tweets in the weirdest of places. I once was walking around to school and saw one of your tweets printed on a sheet of paper hung in the hallway. Like, it's the weird. I can tell you, I've come across your tweets in the weirdest of places.
Wow. Well, yeah, I never imagined that would have sort of taken off the way it did. It sort of started with me tweeting things that, like, I would say at a faculty meeting. But what really inspired me is I was just trying to articulate the values and the passion that I think drive great educators out there, teachers and school leaders. And so I was just trying to give a voice to what I felt like a lot of other people were thinking. I don't think I ever taught anybody anything on Twitter through any of my tweets. But it's about just sort of reminding people of the great work they do and why they do it.
Well, I do think, I love that you just said that. I do think that your tweets, the content that you've shared has been so simplistic. It's been a beautiful reminder for educators in moments of stress to focus on the basics. And I say that in a loving way because I am confident that educators have learned from your content. But yeah, some of your tweets are just really quick snippets of basic reminders that really turn you towards the core of why we're doing what we're doing, or turns you towards the core of not focusing on the emotion of a situation. I feel that more often than not, those simplistic elements are important for us to read. And sometimes the more complex, really rich elements aren't as beneficial, especially not in 160 characters,
Yeah. It's teaching is really hard, and it is really stressful. And any opportunity I have to encourage teachers out there and to try to remind them of their great work and why they matter for kids, I feel like that's time well spent.
I'm sure that we have had this conversation 300 times within our Teach Better family. But Danny, I'd love to flip the script here on you and ask you a simple question regarding our Teach Better family about building a community, building a network. That if an educator's listening, maybe they're even new to this community, new to this podcast, maybe they're just listening in on this episode because they saw that you were on it. If they haven't yet built a community, but maybe they're interested, they're hearing the benefits, how do you get started, especially if you're hesitant to be on social media, especially if you're not sure, like, do you really want to log into Twitter? Is Twitter the right platform? Like, how do you get in the beginner stage?
Well, one thing to know is that you can always take baby steps. Like, I think it's like 90% of people who have these accounts don't actually post anything. They're there just reading what other people write. So you can dip your toes in that water really, really kind of without much vulnerability at all. I think one of the value in part is that teaching can sometimes be lonely and isolating. And sometimes there's teachers out there that might be working in a certain context where they just don't feel like they have any kindred spirits in the building. And so when you see and start to get connected with other people, and it can start just by following people. And I actually one of my sort of role models with this was a principal at Hoover High School here in Birmingham named Jennifer Hogan. And I just went to her office and I said, tell me who I need to follow. And she gave me like 10 names of people to follow. So just, just asking people who they follow. And then if you see somebody that you like their content, you can look to see who they follow or who they reposted or retweeted. So it's not hard to slowly build, and it really doesn't take much vulnerability. You can share as you're comfortable. But I just found it to be a way of exposing yourself to new ideas, things that are not necessarily around in your building or in your current context. And you're able to build some camaraderie with people that are in a different zip code. And it's inspiring.
Yeah, it's kind of like a conga line, right? You find one person and then they hook you up with one more person and they hook you up with one more person. And it
Yeah.
depends on what you're trying to get out of it. Maybe you don't figure that out for the first month or the first 6 months and you're just aimlessly doing it. It's funny you share about posting because I have 2 accounts as I'm reflecting here on how I use networking right now. And I probably use Instagram the most. And that's because I'm more of a visual person. So maybe even that's the first step, trying to figure out what network you want to build your network on. If you're choosing whatever platform you're interested in, but I have an Instagram account that I post on, which is more professional. I follow educators. I post about educator stuff. And then I have my personal account that I literally don't post on. I don't follow anybody that I don't want to consume their content. I only follow people that I want to consume. And that's where I just scroll and scroll and like and scroll and like and save and scroll and scroll. It's just funny to reflect on. I'm not posting there ever. I will never post there because I'm just a consumer on that one. And there's no shame. You don't have to be a
Yeah.
I love that. Well, Danny, I could talk to you forever about so many things, but we have to get into our key question. So friends, stick with us. We're getting into supporting teachers who have students that are struggling with behavior issues and how leaders can step in to support those educators to be successful. Stick with us.
Quick pause to talk about the Teach Better Team's 360 approach to professional development. Now, we know that the Teach Better team was originally founded on mastery learning practices, but we know there is so much more that takes to building a successful school. Head over to teachbetter.com/professional development to look at the Teach Better team's 360 rollout plan, your complete path to lasting educational transformation. It includes personalized student success plans, progressive instruction, aligned content implementation, a supportive environment, true long-term change, and more than anything, time for teachers. Head over to teachbetter.com/professional development to see the whole system in action.
What role do school leaders play in supporting their teachers when they are having student behavior concerns? Let's dive into this with the one and only Danny Steele. As we jump into this topic, I am so excited to look at it from a leader perspective and how this cycle of the entire school ecosystem can lend support for each other. Danny, when we're reflecting on how to begin this conversation, what comes to mind?
Well, the first thing that really jumps out at me is what for me was the most important paradigm shift in school leadership. And like, if you were to ask me what was the biggest lesson you ever learned as a young administrator, it was just over 20 years ago, probably. And I was a young AP. I'd been an AP for 3 years, and the principal in my building was retiring. So I really wanted to be principal. So I was like chomping at the bit. I thought I had dibs on the job. I'd been AP there. Well, I was riding back from a meeting with the principal, and he said, "Danny, I think some of the teachers see you more as an advocate for students than for teachers." And that, it caught me off guard. And initially it kind of made me angry. I would have thought like that was a badge of honor that I'm advocating for kids. And so I couldn't believe that was even held against me. I didn't get that job. I was an AP there for 2 more years. But that summer I had this administrative paradigm shift. And this is the switch that was flipped. When we get into education, 100% of educators get into the business for kids. We're trying to win over kids. We're trying to make a difference for students. At the minute you become an administrator, your mission has to change. Your new goal is to win over the adults in the building, and you are trying to make a difference for the teachers. We still love on the kids. All right. I used to do birthday selfies with kids all the time. We're always connecting with students. But as an administrator, you will be defined by your ability to support your staff. If you ask 100 teachers, what do they look for in an administrator? 99 of them will say, I want someone that's got my back. And the other one didn't understand your question. So that is, anytime I'm talking with young administrators or anybody that will listen, I say that has got to be your goal, is you are there to support your teachers. And so that has been what's driven me for the last 20 years, certainly the last 12 years as a principal. So I think that's the most important thing that I would want to mention first, is that you really have to have that mindset. You take care of the teachers. The teachers are all taking care of the students. Your job is to take care of the teachers and to provide whatever they need to crush it in the classroom. So that mindset is really, really huge. So at that point, then it's just a matter of connecting with your teachers, knowing what it is they need, and making sure they feel free to talk to you. You've got to explicitly communicate that my job is to remove barriers from you teaching in the classroom. And if you've got a student who is off the chain, is disrespectful, bouncing off the walls, whatever, you exhaust your bag of tricks. Like, you talk to parents, whatever your classroom management strategy is, certainly we want to do that. Like, the principal's just about never the first call. But at the point the teacher reaches out to you, and that teacher needs to feel comfortable reaching out to you and say, I need help, then you got to get on your high horse and make it down to that classroom or whatever to provide help with that student. So that's the first thing I want to say, is that has got to be a priority, is that you're going to support that teacher with whatever challenging behavioral needs they're dealing with in the classroom.
I love that being the first important element of this, the trust that's going to be built between the administrator and the teacher. And now I assume the second part is what type of support is going to come from both parties. I was thinking, as you were sharing that, is it going to be, I was trying to think ahead. I'm like, are we talking about if the teacher goes to the administrator and says, I need help? Or is this the administrator identifying in some way, maybe by seeing a student in the office for behavior concerns, that the administrator is going to the teacher and saying, you need help with behavior? I'm so excited to see how you take this. My default position is to assume that every teacher in the building loves kids and wants what's best for students. And that they really do want to do a good job every day they come to work. Typically, it's going to be responding to teachers who are asking for help. If I see a student sitting in the office, I'm never going to assume, well, that's a teacher that's got bad classroom management. I'm going to assume that the student did something that was utterly inappropriate and it got on the teacher's last nerve, and the teacher's at wit's end. So I think it's actually really, really important to make that assumption, because otherwise you're not giving your teacher the benefit of the doubt. That has got to be, from a leadership standpoint, that's got to be fundamental. You're going to give your teachers the benefit of the doubt. Now, that doesn't mean that there's, it's a two-way street. So it's not just about ensuring you're going to provide consequences for the student who's out of line. But the goal, ultimately, when the student is out of class, it's a lose. We want the students in class. So we want to figure out what's the best type of environment we can create where the student is actually acting appropriate so they can stay in class and get that awesome lesson. Yeah, I feel like that's such an important element, and something that was mentioned yesterday in yesterday's episode with Tom Schimmer, that we need to approach behavior in stages, just how, in similar ways, how we approach academics, where in academics, when a student doesn't understand something, we don't say, well, come on, how come you don't understand it, and kick them out of the classroom. But we teach them how to begin to understand the content and continue to work through it in multiple stages, and behavior needs to be handled the same way. I loved how we were able to speak on that. So as a leader, you're discussing a trusting relationship you're discussing the need to really walk in with positive assumptions. What other elements do leaders need to do or need to at least consider when a teacher is struggling with a student that is causing behavioral issues?
Sometimes there's a bad situation because the student is acting out in a way that is just terribly inappropriate and unacceptable. Sometimes there's actually things that the adults can do that impact the environment one way or the other. So there are actually steps that teachers can take to make behavioral issues less likely. There's ways when a student is out of line and disrespectful, certainly there's things that teachers can do that either diffuse that situation or escalate that situation. One role for the school leader is to, when it's appropriate, do what they can to provide some tools for teachers to be better equipped, to be more empowered, to handle some of those tough situations. It's been said that all behavior is communication. It's been said that when a student acts out, it's the result of an unmet need. And so sometimes, in my experience, teachers that are able to look below the surface of the behavior, that are able to look below the surface of the attitude and the apathy, they have better results in forming positive connections with those students that make the behavioral issues less likely.
Yeah, this reminder that school leaders can also identify this as a teachable moment, an opportunity for, further training, and not just training of, the importance of handling behaviors, which seemed to be the type of PD that I was exposed to in my past, but almost training on understanding perspective of what behaviors may mean. I find that so interesting. I wish I was exposed to that earlier in my career. I also would have loved professional development on more tools in my toolbox on how to handle behavior. I worry sometimes we do a lot of professional development on identifying what is going on with the student or what could be going on with the student, and not always enough emphasis on how then we can act better to better serve the student. So, Danny, I love these suggestions. We are going to move on to a major takeaway and your contact information. So, friends, stick with us. We are wrapping up this conversation. I hate to say, but we are going into, of course, some contact information so you can continue this conversation with our guest and a major takeaway. Danny, before we share your contact information, can you identify one major takeaway that you hope viewers or listeners of this podcast are hopefully walking away with if they were able to only, just catch bits and parts of this podcast?
Teachers do the most important work in the schools. That's where the magic happens. So for me, the takeaway is if you're a school leader, your job is to support those teachers. And all students are amazing. All students need to be loved. All students need to be taught. Some students, though, bring challenging behaviors to the classroom. And as a school leader, whether it's a principal, an AP, a dean of behavior, whatever, do everything you can to empathize with that teacher and to do what's needed to support them so they can do their great work with the class.
So powerful, a beautiful reminder, especially as we head into the end of this semester. Danny, I would love to make sure our community is connected to you, not only so they can grab your books, but also so they can follow you on social media and enjoy the next journey that you're in as you have wrapped up this retirement and entering into the next stage of all the goodness that you'll be doing over the next 2 years. Where can we grab the books? Where can we grab the social media handles? Tell us all the details.
So I've got pretty much two professional accounts, Twitter, which is Steele Thoughts, Steele Thoughts, THOUGHTS. And I also have a professional Instagram account don't do quite as much posting there, but you're welcome to follow both. I have a website, steelethoughts.com, where I've got a blog. There's links to my books, and my books can be bought anywhere you buy books. Amazon. Routledge has been my great publisher. Love working with them. I'm working on a new book for leaders, and specifically focusing on instructional leadership and how anybody can do that right out of the blocks. You don't have to be a guru of curriculum and instructional expertise, but you got to be great at connecting with teachers, and you got to be curious about what is going on in the school. So I love connecting with other teachers, with school leaders. I love getting to speak to different groups. And I've had the good fortune of speaking around the country to some groups. So I love connecting. So I'd be happy to connect with anyone in your audience.
Yeah, friends, if you are looking for a good leadership book to maybe pass around to new principals as they enter into their early years in a leadership and your role is to mentor them, you can grab Danny's book and do a little book study. Lots of different ideas on how you can revamp the leaders in your district or the leadership members in your building. Danny has a lot of options for you, especially when that third book comes out. So excited to get that started. And if you have any issues connecting with Danny or finding his books, feel free to reach out to me as well. I'd be more than happy to get you those links and resources. Danny, thank you so much for coming on the pod.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me, and thanks for what you do to encourage teachers around the country.